And I think, or the local folks are. So you get the people who are respected for their work by the local folks. The local folks, and on the procurement effort, cover both processing and accept that outcome. So if you get your part done, test that. Assuming Sharon will be there, she might very well be there. This meeting that we want to have. The other we had was how do you address for because sugar is a crop that they don't want to deal with in the title. I think I got a better understanding of what you know. The chemical guy who raised that flag highest is why. So no, it's not me. It's, so we have one of the other issues, and to be at the meeting next week, along with David and so I can't make any commitments. Won't know for 6 months. This new task that was mentioned that Dave's going to give us a little power.
No problem.
We'll turn it over to
For having me.
The other was the group's conclusions.
Sure. Here, that's 20,000 tons, maybe 150 tons per hour. Is that what the equipment size is? Hard equipment size is. Whether put together equipment, we'll find out. The hot tube reactor that Rand told you about with the residence time flash tank. Feed. And caloric, high value, used all year round. Running the particular climate, Florida is different than North Florida. If that can be done, even though we know it, what works in Michigan won't necessarily in this. Especially an LCA test for RIN. An estimate of the OPEX at 50 to 100 million gallons. Call a Sweetwater, 10+% gross dissolved in it, and can be stored and shipped. Equipment fabricated to put on a skid that we can take around and do this work.
As well as an initial stage, of course, if we were able.
Okay, so we actually just created a video, and it shows the steam explosion process on our pilot scale system. And this was actually a process that we completed, I think, about 2 weeks ago on sugar beets. And it has captions, so it's not really necessary for me to, I think, add to those captions. I'm going to let you guys watch it. There's no sound, and you can just see here our technician, Pei-Ling, is feeding the sugar beets into the hopper. And then there's a screw in there, and that screw is going to push that material through into the system. And there is a jet cooker that is actually adding steam to the material, and the material continues on into this holding tube that you see. There's 3 tubes there, and I'm standing sort of behind there. And that is where the material is being held for 1 to 3 minutes with the steam at 50 psi. And then I'm there, and I'm actually controlling the pressure with a back pressure valve, and I'm monitoring the pressure on a digital display. And you can see Randy and our technician, Sandra, and they're taking a look at the computer that is actually logging all of the data. And there's our flash tank, and that's where all the material is collecting. And then it goes from the flash tank through a tube using a pump to where it is collected. And you can see Sandra is here actually collecting the material, and you'll actually get to see what it looks like. It's like a brown applesauce sort of looking material. And it's very hot, that's why it's flowing so well here, but once it gets down to like room temperature, it becomes much thicker, obviously. And there you go.
Thank you, Christine. So that shows the highly labor-intensive and the willingness for Randy and his team and Sandra and Christine to do a lot of hard work. It's been a real labor of love. We really appreciate you stepping up. This was just spontaneous. We would need a product and a solution given Florida's temperature, climate, humidity to stabilize these beats as quickly as we can. So we have a 4 to 8 hour window. One thing we want to clarify, I had some questions that people asked me, how long is this crop? When do you plant it? The beets are planted in October, November, harvested in April, May. They need to be harvested before their feet get wet, before it gets too wet. Then we would have a crop and a half of sorghum basically, or a crop of corn in rotation. The beet has to be rotated every 3 years because of virus and fungus. That's the rotation. But I just wanted to make clear, several people said, how long can you grow beets? Well, it's basically October 1 to May in Florida. It can be extended, but you run the risk of if it gets below, if the field gets flooded, it's not good for the beet. So with that, I want to thank.
Yeah, let
do
me
we
ask,
have-
can I ask a
Yeah.
question? On what the work that you did it, how much, there's always scale issues in all of these things. You want to know that the economics of the process are going to make sense. At least we know we can do it based on your experiment. But as you assess that, what scale, how much of that did you actually do?
About 200 pounds of sugar beets.
Okay. Now, what kind of challenge do you run into when you increase that to get to, what is it where our first lot wants to be about then?
Well, let's go back to David. How many tons an acre? I mean, an hour? How many tons an hour?
Well, what we heard is that current harvest equipment can put raw beet out of the ground at 120 to 150 tons an hour. Now, that's fine. If you only run the equipment for half a day and it takes you the rest of the day to catch up, or if you run the equipment for 8 hours and additional 5 or 6 to catch up.
One obstacle that we encountered in resizing our beet tissue, we went to perhaps a much smaller size than is absolutely required. And as a result of that, our pumping slowed down, our feed pump. We had to feed it much more slowly than we would citrus peel, just to give the pump a chance to catch it and push it through the system. So there's still some need to appropriately combine your pump, what pump you're going to use, related to how fast you need to pump this stuff.
Okay. You guys have, from a resource point of view, because we're looking at what the challenges are now and what we need to go and what our shopping list needs to be. So the question is, do you have the wherewithal with what you've been budgeted to scale this up to get the necessary throughput? Okay.
So where we are, Rich, if I may, our group made a determination of what needed to be done, and we basically delegated it to Dave to size the equipment, spec the equipment, estimate the energy use, and estimate the cost if we can use existing equipment. So that's our next step, to test that on a 500-acre model so that we can have an answer for both the feed company.
We need to write up a check. It's not going to get them the money to run what it needs to run.
This as an economic development group, okay, a public group. Was to design the plan that's going to make money, or to make the decision that that plant is going to be good data, economic data, engineering data.
Another step for us was data and try and assess, just use that plant. Could purpose an underutilized facility. Could we go to Tropicana, go to Dreyfus facility? There's 4 or 5 potential operating plants at 500,000 gallons or more.
Kind of structure out what we need, whether it's for a value-added grant proposal please share, we need to be able to identify that, and hopefully that's the path you're on in 60 days here.
And that's the goal.
Tee that up, so that'll
We
be.
we may be able to
nothing we
get
can
some of that.
discuss in great depth.
Hopefully David and I can put our heads together before next week and do
Yeah,
at least a
and-
first sketch, so when we get up to DC, we can there may be sources for support in that area.
Yeah, and that could either be, could be ARS, could be NIFA, potentially, I would think. Randy?
There's one proposal that's been submitted. I don't know when review panels are going to be meeting for that, what the results for that would be.
You mean our?
We already did, we've done 2 grant
We did,
applications.
okay.
We
that
did
one.
2, we did 2.
But that wasn't the equipment plan. It's the equipment plan.
That was more for the crop itself,
Yeah, and process development.
looks like, but doing what's appropriate in that area, key ingredient here is for the value, what we want and have the right kind of advocacy, we can get there, just like we got here with this
Right.
program.
Is there anything else in our group that we missed? Challenges,
Just got
pathways.
the 2 we got to add, the one Dave brought up and this one relative to the processing.
Repurposing assets that are in the ground to, so if there's a pellet mill that's
a two, a one, 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 two, one, a two, a one, a two, a one. Hey Al, are you gonna need me on Sunday? Okay, cool. I'm just gonna sit here and book a gig while I'm checking at the same time. Please refrain if I start thinking out loud. Looks pretty good. Up to here. Shit, that sucks. Check it together. Get back in. A one, a two, a one, a two, a three, a four, a one. 1, 2. You hear me?
For
Coming up.
work. And on the procurement effort, we discussed the work that
Now
Dave
we're
has
talking.
done and the whole beat
Now we're talking.
certification piece.
Yeah.
The ground
Hey,
properly.
hey.
But the point that you made, Dave, was that the
1, 2, check.
the fuel
Hello,
that
hello.
eventually comes from that
Hey.
is
Hey,
there really
hey.
are two pieces.
Got a little
Ultimately,
latency. I
certification
don't know
will
if
have
that
to cover
matters. 1,
both
2.
processing and the side
1,
of
2.
making the fuel. And that particular
So good.
issue, it would appear that ethanol being ethanol, you could pursue that part under RSB, which they seem to accept, with whom the airlines would accept that outcome. I think EPA would. So if you get your part done on the with the crops themselves, coupling that with an RSB activity, which could be acceptable to the Sharon Lees in the world, and we should
1,
test
2.
that
1,
at
2.
our meeting, assuming Sharon will
No,
be there, and I think she
is that
might very
you?
well be there at this meeting.
Yes,
so
Mother.
that becomes a meeting
I'll be
that
here.
we want to have.
All day.
The other discussion we had was how do you attract BETO, the DOE people who have not engaged so far because sugar is a crop that they don't want to deal with under the Title I provision. So we got an elaboration on the discussion we had this morning with the Toronto family here. And the thought process was, and I think I got a better understanding of what you were talking about relative to the content, the sugar content, and sucrose versus glucose versus plus fructose, that we shouldn't need markers. You know the chemical content of what's coming out of the crop, and the question we need to take up with Harry Baumas and the guy who raised that flag highest is why doesn't that tell you everything you need to know? And if it doesn't, what do we need in terms of additional? Somebody's getting a music play. Is that you? Everybody's looking at their phones. So no, it's not me. It's somebody else. So we have a couple of missions that we want to take up next week. One of the other issues, and I think Dave's going to be at the meeting next week, along with David and yourself and myself, and we'll have our meeting with DOE. And the argument, and I finally got the spelling right, azeotropic, which is a purity question on ethanol. So what we want to do is convince them that they really do want to, as part of their working with Logitech, they want to expand the purity, I'll call it the purity level of the alcohol that they work with. Whereas they're currently working with a 99% purity level, the alcohols we get here are going to be less than that, where we should make sure they're a little bit less than that, and then say this is not an issue of where what sugars came from. It's an issue of whether you can expand the purity spec. And by the way, we can get that alcohol to allow you to expand the purity spec. Why is that a problem? Or that can work, right? And if it doesn't work, then we got a policy argument. And that discussion, I think, is very frequently people will work process issues with something less than the absolute, the real feedstock they want, because quite frankly, they can't get it in quantities at the purity level that they want. So I think this creates an opportunity for us to set up a meeting with DOE staff now. If DOE staff says, gee, I don't know who my boss is, so I can't make any commitments, and I won't know for 6 months, which is probably what's going to happen, is then we've got the case for the transition teams to work on. And to the degree that Ed, you or Mike or somebody knows somebody who's going to be working transition, then that gives us a case. So I think we have not just this new task that was mentioned, that Dave's going to give us a little paragraph that we can, here's the key, here's the problem and the path to resolution, but we also have some tactics that we want to follow, and I think it was productive discussion in that sense. So thank you all. Thank you, Dave. Great impromptu coming up here.
No problem.
We'll turn it over to Dave.
Thanks for having me. I'll leave the stage to you.
Yeah.
Check one.
So, great job, Rich. Great job. Thanks to your group for the hard work you put in on that. Our group talked about the production economics, and we had 3 key challenges. One was making sure that the new sugar feedstocks are produced will be price competitive at scale. The other was identifying current efforts to facilitate the project development plan and timeline. And the third was being able to ensure these crops, these biofuel crops, at levels equivalent to food crops. So with that, David, if you could kind of summarize the group's conclusions.
Sure. We made some process decisions, which was the main event. So we're targeting 500 acres. At 40 tons an acre, that's 20,000 tons of raw beets. And that would be processed somewhere between, at a rate of somewhere between 120, maybe 150 tons per hour, as that's what the equipment size is, harvesting equipment size is. Whether we can put together equipment